Good afternoon. We are together again for our wonderful Erev Shabbat Friday afternoon, Henry and Lisa Manoucheri Parsha Shiur, with the Rosh Yeshiva at the Talmudic University, Rabbi Akiva Zweig. Today, Rabbi Zweig will be discussing a double Parsha, Acharei Mos and Kedoshim. The topic will be the Jewish goal of intimacy, plus intimacy and parenting the right way versus the wrong way. The month of Iyar is sponsored by the Slomiansky family in loving memory of Daniel ben Arya Yaakov Halevi. Zichrano Livracha, may his memory be a blessing. This week's class is also sponsored in memory of all the fallen soldiers and victims in Am Yisrael and for the return of all the hostages, God willing. This week's class is dedicated to all members of K'lal Yisrael, our people suffering pain and hardships, and for the merit of a Refu'ah Sh'leima, complete healing for Yisroel Ben Rochel, Meir ben Ruth, Chaim Yitzchak ben Chaya B'racha, Yidel Ben Rochel, Moshe David Ben Rochel, Sonayela Basya, Yehudis Rus, and Levi Yitzchok Isaac ben Orah Yutel. May they all have a perfect healing, and may our wishes and learning help our nation and our soldiers through these challenging times. Without further ado, Rabbi Akiva Zweig on our week's double Parsha Acharei Mos and Kedoshim.
Good afternoon, everyone. Really a joy to be with everybody. Looking forward to discussing Parshiyos Acharei Mos Kedoshim, and also listening to your comments, your questions, and insight. I learned so much from everyone, and I really appreciate having the opportunity to be with all of you. So we are going to discuss Parshiyos Acharei Mos and Kedoshim. Before we dive into the Parsha, I want to just kind of remind all of us that learning Torah is so important, not only because it's a mitzvah, and not only because it gives us insight into life, but it also continues to remind us and calibrate our thinking, A, onto what's really important, and B, onto not getting distracted by a lot of the noise in the world. This past Wednesday, we did a shiur titled Elevating Above the Fray. We talked about blue zones, and specifically we talked about Torah blue zones. Kind of incredibly, I just happened to meet a doctor who has a patient who wrote a book on blue zones just yesterday. And my point is that here we are again, facing a lot of crisis in K'lal Yisrael. And I don't know that everyone is properly attending to that in their minds and in their actions. We are unfortunately again seeing fallen soldier news updates among our people, which is tragic. We know that there's a tremendous amount of fighting that's happening in Gaza. We know that the situation with Iran is greatly unstable. It's difficult to get a read on what's exactly going on in the White House vis-a-vis these issues. And so there's a lot that we need to be davening for, and there's a lot that we need to be taking responsibility for, because as we've mentioned many times, what happens with the fate of the world directly rests on the Jewish people taking responsibility for their mission that we accepted at Har Sinai to be a mamleches kohanim, a kingdom of kohanim, a kingdom of servers to the world, v'goy kadosh, and a holy people. And of course, the concept of holiness, which is something we're going to talk about today, means that that's a responsibility as well. Just like being a kingdom of servers is a responsibility, being a holy people is a responsibility. So today we're going to talk quite a bit about what is holiness and what is really the goal of Jewish understanding and intention behind intimacy and raising children. And we're going to get to it with an incredible commentary from the Sforno. But first, let's just kind of lay the groundwork. A good almost 50% of Parshiyos Acharei Mos talks about, maybe closer to 40%, talks about the illicit relations, the immoral sexual relationships between men and women. And the Torah concludes with the fact that we need to know that the reason that the nations of Israel that got kicked out before we inherited Eretz Yisrael, they were actually spat out from the land because of their behaviors, their immorality, and their depravity. And we need to be careful that the same does not happen to us. The end of Parshas Kedoshim also has many sentences that are dedicated to this discussion. And also, again, the Torah repeats that the land of Israel spat out the nations that came before us. So there's a big emphasis in these two Parshios of the immorality of the non-Jewish nations, both in Mitzrayim, but also specifically in Eretz Canaan, that we, of course, inherit and make it Eretz Yisrael, right? They were kicked out because of their immorality. Now, that's obviously interesting that that's such a big emphasis, and the Torah, in other words, separate from idolatry, which is known that the Torah talks about extensively in Sefer Devarim, there's this immorality that seems to be a tremendous basis for the fact that these nations cannot merit occupying Eretz Yisrael. So that's interesting. Now, what I'd like to do to begin with a question is the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim, which is the second of the two Torah readings, and then I'm going to share the commentary of the Sforno, and then from there we will share about the Jewish goals of intimacy and raising children the right way versus the wrong way. So the Torah tells us at the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim, Hashem told Moshe to tell the whole congregation of the Jewish people, you shall be holy, Kedoshim tihiyu, because I am holy, Hashem your God. Now over here we have two famous commentators, Nachmanides and Rashi, discussing this kind of generic, although beautiful sounding word of holiness, but it's unclear. Like if you would, speak to your wife or you counsel a couple and you say, really, we need to be holy. Really, you're supposed to be holy. They would turn around and ask you, okay, what does that mean? What are you telling me to do? What's the mindset? What's the activity? What's it all about? What is holiness? So over here, these two commentators have differing opinions on what the Torah is referencing when it says to be holy. Famously, Rashi says, be separate from illicit relationships, stay away, be parush, be distant from illicit relationships and from sin, because wherever you find a fence for immorality, there you find kedusha, there you find holiness. So therefore, when the Torah says be holy, it means be separate from illicit relationships and sin and make a fence against these misbehaviors. That's Rashi's opinion. Nachmanides says that no, it means something different, whatever his reason is to argue. He says that what it's talking about is that the Torah permits many things. So as much as people tend to look at Judaism as very restrictive, there are many things that the Torah permits. And one of them is food and various kinds of food, including meat and fish. There's a discussion we talked about on Wednesday, if in the desert the Jewish people were allowed to eat meat of animals that were not sacrifices, but certainly ultimately in the land of Israel and moving forward, we are allowed to eat kosher animal meat today as long as it's properly slaughtered. That's a physical pleasure and can be an indulgence, and many other pleasures in that category, relations between a man and wife, those things are, a husband and wife, those things are permitted. And what the Ramban says is that the Torah is telling us, be careful with permitted pleasures and don't overindulge. Don't be giving into excess in these behaviors. So be holy actually means be moderate and be careful to not go overboard. And in the famous wording of Ramban, don't become a disgusting person with the permission of the Torah. So a person who's gluttonous and eats and eats and eats and can't get enough, and all he thinks about is what's the pleasure of food that he's going to have, and can incredibly indulges in that all the time, or conversely, or I should say differently, a person does similarly together with their spouse, and they're all about their physical intimacy. All of that is an overindulgence, and that's not holy. So therefore, be holy with the permission of the Torah, as opposed to don't be a disgusting person with the permission of the Torah. Okay, so those are the two commentaries. Now, I'm always fascinated because I never hear anybody else ask this question, and it always strikes me as very interesting. Normally people are thinking about, okay, who's right? What does holiness mean? How do you define holiness? I have a different question. One would have thought that if the Torah is making this very generic directive, and it seems to sound incredibly important, be holy, then one would think that the next sentence would sort of begin to outline what we're talking about and what to do. Now, the very next sentence in Parshas Kedoshim is that a man should have awe for his father, and his mother, and also observe my Shabbosos. I am Hashem your God. So it seems that however you understand what holiness means, the Torah is perfectly happy with a non sequitur in the next sentence. Be holy means don't be a disgusting person with the permission of the Torah. Instead, make sure that you're being moderate and you're not overindulging to excess, etc. And a person should have awe for his mother and father. Very interesting connection. I don't know why that's a logical progression. And the same thing according to Rashi. Be holy means create fences against immorality and all the illicit relationships of physical proximity that the Torah talks about between a man and a woman of various relatives, etc., even with one's own wife, that she not be a nida, she shouldn't be menstruating at that time. Okay, very good. But then why is the next sentence, a person should have awe for his father and his mother? Just doesn't seem to flow naturally at all. So before we get into answering that question, I would like to go back to Parshiyos Acharei Mos, and I would like to share what I think is an amazing commentary of the Sforno. Nachmanides has similar points, and Rambam has similar points, but he has the Sforno actually has a really incredible framing that I haven't seen anywhere else, and it's particularly eye-opening for our subject today, which is the true goal of intimacy and raising children the right way versus the wrong way. I should also mention that our dear friend Joseph Vital, who's normally joining us in this year, and he's actually traveling to Italy, and he told me he went to Strasbourg, I don't know exactly where it is, to the synagogue of the Sforno. He knows how much we enjoy that commentary. He took a picture and he sent it to me. So special thank you to Joseph. And so here I am, happens to be sharing another commentary of the Sforno. Says the Sforno that the Torah emphasizes very, very clearly when it frames these illicit relationships as not coming close to one's relatives, because that's the way the Torah actually begins. Ish el kol b'she'er b'sarel lo sikruvu l'galos erev. The Torah says, each and every person who is related, has blood, flesh relatives, really what the Torah says. Flesh relatives don't come close to uncover the nakedness. That's the general kind of sentence of introduction that the Torah tells us for all the relatives. So says the Sforno, the Torah is specifically, very intentionally prohibiting relatives. Why is that? So he explains that really the offspring of relatives should be the best. They should be the best children. Why? He says because the man and the woman, what he calls the active and the passive parties, they're close to each other in temperament. So whether he means mood or he means character, whatever that means exactly, it would properly follow that these children would be more worthy and compatible. So one thing he's seemingly very much saying is that when the parents are similar in disposition, or at least on the same page, that should produce the best children. As it happens, he says, with the birth of Moshe, Aharon, and Miriam, because Moshe's father, Amram, is the nephew of Moshe's mother, Yocheved. It is astonishing that the three big shepherds of the Jewish people in the desert, Moshe, Aharon, and Miriam, that in their merit we get the clouds of glory, and we get the manna raining down from heaven, and we get the well, the water that followed the Jewish people through the desert. In these three people's merit, they are the offspring of what the Torah later prohibited. In other words, at the time of Amram and Yocheved getting married, the Torah did not prohibit that relationship, but later the Torah does. Here in our Parsha say an aunt cannot marry a nephew. That's not okay. Well, guess what? That relationship produced Moshe, Aharon, and Miriam. And of course, ergo, Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Isamar as well. And all the Kohanim of the Jewish people, right? Incredible. So that should be the ideal, says the Sforno. He says, and that's true. That should be the case. But there's a big problem. And the problem is that most human beings, when they engage in these acts of intimacy, they're not thinking of Hashem. They're not thinking of their creator and their service to their creator. They're thinking of their physical pleasure. And so much so that the sentence in Psalms tells us, Behold, I was shaped in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Now that's a sentence from Tehillim 51:7. And it's a famous sentence where people talk about who David HaMelech's mother really was, because it says that in sin he was conceived. Is that him? Is that talking about it? A different thing? Is it allegorical? But the bottom line is, says this foreigner, that sentence means that most people, so to speak, are conceived in sin, because the intention of the parents is not for the service of the Creator. And then he takes it a step further, since relatives are very accessible to one another, and the human tendency is towards the physical self-gratification, pleasure. So then when they would think about marrying their relatives, they would heavily focus only on the physical pleasure, because their union is not prohibited, if it would not have been prohibited, in other words. And these thoughts would increase, and their union, meaning their physical sexual union, would be only for the purpose of pleasure. And then they would have this pleasure in their physical activities together, and they would stop from reproducing, because that would not be their intention to have children, and the earth would be filled with lewdness, which is what the Torah describes before the time of the flood. So that's the Sforno's commentary. So therefore, the Sforno says that the Torah is specifically prohibiting relatives, even though that should produce the best children, because the human tendency would be to not take advantage of that opportunity and really think of serving their creator, but rather they would think of self-serving pleasure, and therefore it would not work well, and therefore the Torah prohibits it. It's a fascinating commentary. I highly recommend everybody see it for themselves. My point is that, we have a Torah principle that I'm going to kind of maximize right now. And the Torah principle says, from that which the Torah prohibits, you can imply that which the Torah permits. That which the Torah permits, you can imply that which the Torah prohibits. Or from that which the Torah says positively, you can infer the negative. And that which the Torah says negatively, you can infer the positive. So what I think we should take out from this Sforno commentary is that, and he also just, I just also want to say just another beautiful point that he makes, or the commentary of the Sforno says, if you look when the Torah describes these illegal relationships, it talks about uncovering the nakedness, which is a pretty graphic way for the Torah to talk. Torah generally is much more circumspect when it talks about physical intimacy things. But the Torah repeats again and again over here the concept of uncovering the nakedness, and the Sforno says because that tends to be what's on people's minds, and they give into these physical desires in a kind of gung-ho sort of way that they then become completely consumed with the physical pleasure component. So what I would like to do is imagine the converse. What's really the opposite of this, right? Assuming that this is so bad exactly because of what the Sforno says, what could really be so good? Or in other words, what really should be the physical intimacy that the Torah does advocate, when the Torah does say, when a man will take a wife? What should be the focus? And the answer is obviously to serve the Creator. Okay, serve the Creator by getting married? How does that work? So first and foremost, to serve the Creator by getting married, that harkens us back to the beginning, when Hashem said it is not good for man to be alone. You know when the Torah said that? The Torah said that when man had his wife as part of his self. When man and woman were in the Garden of Eden and they were back to back, man on one side and woman on the other side, the Torah said it's not good for man to be alone. How is he alone? He's the opposite of alone. He's totally fused with his partner. Yeah, but he doesn't see her as a partner. He doesn't see her as a separate entity to whom he needs to give himself over and to get out of himself towards her. He just sees it as himself. He sees, oh, I'm just here by myself. And in fact, the Torah tells us he was looking for a partner. That's how disconnected he was from recognizing the woman that was a part of him. That's not good, says Hashem. It's not good for people to be so egocentric and so unaware, so completely disconnected, and as though they're in a different reality, which some people call narcissism, and not see the other. That's terrible, says Hashem. So Hashem separates them, and he creates what we know to be marriage. That's where Chaya B'racha comes from. And the joy that a person gets by recognizing there's an other, and by looking outside of themselves, and by giving themselves over to the process of the union, requires a tremendous unselfishness, the opposite of narcissism, the ability to really learn someone else. A couple of weeks ago on the Wednesday morning shiur, we spoke about communication and how people don't realize that so much of communication doesn't happen in words, it happens in body language, and it happens in tone of voice. And I pointed out that with all the secular wisdom on this subject, they forgot the most important thing, which is that communication really happens when somebody's paying attention and listening. And not only listening to what another person says, but to what a person does or to what a person doesn't say. All of that requires a tremendous, tremendous humility, a tremendous ability to be the opposite of narcissistic and arrogant. And so if we want to know what the Torah is advocating in marriage, understand that what the Torah is trying to keep us away from in the illicit relationships is the pursuit of thinking of self-gratification. So what's the opposite of that? The pursuit of giving, the pursuit of getting into another person's world. How can you benefit the other? That's what the Torah is advocating as creating a real relationship. But more than that, based on this Sforno, the Torah is telling us, because we should want to improve the world by making sure that our children are better than us. Not that they have more money than us. Not that their lives are easier than ours. But that they function as better servants to Hashem, the Jewish people, and the world, the Mamleches Kohanim, and the holy people. That their mission is to bring more good for others to the world. That's what marriage should be about. How can we form a union to create children that will be more selfless and better servers than us? And you know how many questions of parenting that would answer? I had a story just this past week where this husband and wife that I'm counseling, they're having a big machlokas over how to do their daughter's bas mitzvah. And basically, long story made short, the wife thought the daughter wants this, and the husband thinks that this would be better, the other thing would be better, and they agree that it should be, that the husband will take care of it the way the wife wants, and then the husband's kind of, I'll do it, but she doesn't even appreciate that. And it's a whole machlokas. And I said to both of them, I said, you realize the only important thing here is what's going to help your daughter to feel loved, feel appreciated, and feel good about this experience. Realize that's the only important thing here. And then they just told me that suddenly their daughter came to them and said she wants something different, and they finally both realized together what could be better for their daughter. Unfortunately, it's sometimes the last question that people are really collaborating on. They're not collaborating on it. They're not saying, look, our only mission is to do what's best for our children. That's the problem of raising children the wrong way. And it's built on an intimacy that is also self-serving for the purposes of self-gratification. And the Sforno says this explicitly. Even though the goal should be better children, and better children should come from relatives, we can't rely on that for people to be able to not focus on their self-gratification. There's just too much temptation. It won't work. That's the Sforno. Whether you agree with that as being the main reason or a reason, it's certainly a very interesting reason that he says, and his proof is pretty compelling, right? Amram and Yocheved, the aunt and the nephew, produce three of the greatest Jews to ever live, hands down, Aaron, Moshe, and Miriam, right? So what I would like to suggest, based on all of this, is that there's one magic bullet. There is literally a magic bullet. And the magic bullet, the Torah tells us at the beginning of Parshas Kadosh, meaning, what do I mean by a magic bullet? I mean, if we want to know how can we ensure that our relationships with our spouses are really going to be built on selflessness rather than selfishness, on being able to focus on what's truly best for the children, but not, again, I want to be very clear, not based on what's best for the children, that children enjoy their lives the most, but to produce children that are even more selfless than we are and better servers to Hashem, the Jewish people, and creation than we are. There's one major thing you need to do, and that is to have awe for your own parents. That's the answer. Because if you want to really be holy, you need to stop your own sense of entitlement, your own sense that your parents are here to serve you, and to recognize that just like Hashem does everything for you, and you need to appreciate that, and then you need to become empowered to be his servant, to fulfill the giving to the world. That is also your relationship with your parents, which is why the Torah compares the respect and the awe that we have for our parents to the respect and the awe that we should have for Hashem. The Talmud says that the honor for our parents needs to be the honor equal to the honor of Hashem. Now this is, let me tell you, when it comes to dating, it's literally amazing. There's no question that children that have difficult relationships with their parents should be a red flag. Now, don't get me wrong. Not all parents are perfect. But it's a child's job to learn how to respect and have awe for his parents, no matter what the circumstances. Now, it's true, and believe me, I get questions like this all the time. So many questions. First marriages and second marriages, and parents that don't seem to want what's good for their children, and parents that seem to emotionally abuse their children, or even sometimes, God forbid, worse, right? I get questions like this all the time. But if you want to know if you're going to be able to build a genuine giving, selfless relationship with your spouse, it directly depends on a spouse's ability to have awe and respect for their parents. It's as simple as that. It's crazy. It's like a lightning bolt that the Torah is telling us here. So says Rashi, you know what you have to do? You have to stay away from immorality in order to be a holy person. That's true. But where is a person going to get the strength of character to not build narcissistic, self-gratifying relationships? By having awe for his parents. That's where it's going to come from. So the next sentence is have awe for your parents. Learn that life is not all about you. Learn that when you get married, it's not only about what your spouse can do for yourself. Says Ramban. From a different vantage point, you could argue it's different for different people. He says, look, so many things in the world that we could focus on, that we're allowed to focus on, that we're allowed to take pleasure in, things that the Torah permits. Okay, but is that the goal? I'm getting ready to retire, and I'm going to play golf twice a week, and I'm going to go on a cruise once every other month, and I'm going to go to this place and that place. Great. Nothing wrong with those things. But what's the balance of that? Are you much more of a giver than a taker? Are you learning to grow your ability to serve? Are you taking responsibility for the world that Hashem gave to you to fulfill his purpose in it? Do you have awe for your parents? Very simple question. Says the Torah, that's what you have to focus on. So much would be solved in our relationships if we simply made sure that we have proper respect and awe for our parents. We're going to talk in a second about parents that are no longer here. And does our spouse, and do we, as parents, have a collaborative system by which we're trying to ensure that our children are also learning to become servers of Hashem, the Jewish people, and the world? Simple as that. That's what Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam did. And it is true that the more compatible we are, the more on the same page we are, the more that we don't spend time arguing over, is it this school or is it that school? Is it this behavior? Is it that behavior? The more we would be on the same page, the better our children would likely be. Exactly the reason that relatives should be allowed to procreate. But because it's too difficult to be that close to somebody and also be that other-centered, the Torah doesn't go in that direction. So I think that, as we mentioned at the beginning of the Shiur, we're so entitled, we're so spoiled. The minute that we're not so worried about anti-Semitism, it's life as usual. The minute that we're worried about anti-Semitism, the world is falling. The minute that we think Trump is good for the Jewish people in Israel, okay, back to business as usual. The minute that we're worried about what is Trump doing with Iran and Israel, the sky is falling. We're truly, truly forgetting that Hashem gave us a very specific mission. And his very specific mission is, don't be an entitled people. Take responsibility for yourselves in the world. Build relationships that are other-centered. And produce children that are even more other-centered than you. Now, it's true, not all of us have our parents. And it's true, not all of us have parents that we would think are so easy to have awe and respect for them. But we have to do the maximum Torah obligation of internalizing that part of what's healthy for a person is to understand that even though their situation is not perfect, you have responsibilities towards your parents. You have to not degrade them, even if they do things with you that they should not do. All of that is part and parcel of learning appropriateness, role responsibility, and other-centeredness. And if we do that, then that's a tremendous formula for producing tremendous children. Children that will truly live to be leaders because they will look to serve the higher missions of this world and become like Moshe and Aaron and Miriam. So for those of us that don't have parents, or don't have parents that it's so easy to have awe and respect for them, we have to just understand we still owe them. We still owe our whole lives to the choices that they made that produced us. We still have to remember that we don't deserve our existence. Just like our parents did things to bring us here, Hashem did things to bring us here, and we have a tremendous, we should have a tremendous attitude of whatever we can learn from them, that we do learn from them, just like we're supposed to continue to learn from Hashem. Shema b'ni musar avicha v'al titosh tarasimecha. You need to listen to the musar of your father and to the Torah of your mother. And if, God forbid, a person doesn't have parents that can teach them anything, okay, Hashem is the ultimate father and mother. That's fine. But in the three-dimensional world, this world and spiritual world, we have so much to learn. And in order to be holy, we have to be other-centered rather than self-centered. And I'll just conclude with the fact that the two points, that the truest, most fulfilling, greatest pleasure in a relationship is giving, not taking. And therefore, the Ramban, when he wrote his book on intimacy, called it the Da'as HaKedosha, the holy knowledge, which means the holy union, holiness. If you really want to get to know someone, you got to stop thinking about yourself. And there's no greater pleasure or holy experience than that. Any questions or comments?
Rabbi, I think there are a couple of comments on the
Okay.
chat.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, Ari Marinelli asked the question: why is self-indulgence so much worse when it involves relatives? So yes, you're correct, Ari, that it's corrupting, the ideal that could be. But the way the Sforno says it is that because of their comfort level with each other, they're going to feel basically more at ease with being more focused on the physical than otherwise would be. In other words, they have a little easier time letting go of being selfless and engaging in being selfish because of their greater commonality and because of their greater comfort level with each other. It's kind of like, we do let our relatives sometimes, slide a lot more than, other people. That's what it seems to be. You can look at it and see what you think. Yeah.
It has a higher chance of kind of devolving into
much greater
of using the other person.
Correct. Yeah, that's what he seems to say. Yeah.
I see that Dr. Finkelstein has his hand up.
Please, yes.
You guys, so it's funny. I was always kind of a Freud skeptic. I always felt like Freud got maybe something's right, something's wrong, but obviously it was a little bit crazy. And I have to say, what's interesting is that the science has definitely come in support of some of what his ideas were around this in really, really surprising ways. There's been a number of case studies where relatives who have not grown together, they don't develop the taboo that stops genetic similarity from producing sexual desire. And the result is that in all of the cases where this happens, where you have relatives who are reunited after not having grown up together, and it really doesn't matter which way it goes, whether it's father, daughter, or son, and a brother, sister, there is an irresistible sexual desire they experience for one another. It is overwhelming. Okay, wow. and there's numerous documented cases of this. Wow. Right? So in fact, what we know is that Freud was actually correct. There's so many documented cases of this that it's well characterized in the literature. You feel this sudden sense of like having not been fulfilled your whole life, right? And now there's someone who's just like you, who has these similar features and dispositions and ideas, and it's like a mirror, and like so it's a kind of narcissistic black hole of emotive gratification. Okay. Wow. Well, what's really interesting about that is, what did Freud associate that with? This instinct for doing that, receding into the unconscious, right? That is the fundamental psychological association with the impulse for incestuous relationships. Is falling back. I don't know
what that means. What does receding into the unconscious mean?
It means that, like, receding into the unconscious.
Oh, receding.
Receding, yeah. So in other words, you're no longer being conscious, you're no longer being conscientious. Wow. Right? All of that is obliterated through and that is expressed psychologically, according to Freud, and apparently in actuality through the desire for sexual intercourse with people who are close to us. Now that all sounds crazy. Like, to me, that sounds crazy. But it's obvious, but it's true. I think it is true. The last thing I want to say, and I'm not sure exactly what to do with this, because I think it's like kind of like, it's the thing you pointed out about Moshe Rabbeinu is probably better pointed out through the lineage of Mashiach. Right? That when you look at the lineage of Mashiach, starting with Moab, right? Starting with the incest of Moab, and then working its way through like the kind of somewhat incestuous relationship of Yehuda and Tamar, right? There's a forbidden relationship. And also through Ruth, who is like, a niece, like kind of a relative of, in each case, you're playing with this kind of like, you're playing at the impulse for incest. And in the first case, it's obliterative and unconscious. They're drunk, right? It's really interesting that there's something that we have. Really
yeah, I don't know if I would say it's a better example, just because it's hard to compare Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam to anyone. But I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's for sure. You're right. There's so much there in terms of that comparison.
I think what it is. Okay, I think what it is. I'm gonna take a stab at this. I think what it is this: that in each case, there are changes in the agreement structure. In the first case, everyone's unconscious and obliterative. The man is like the man's unconscious and the woman is deceptive. In the second case, I think Yehuda is deceived, but the woman knows what she's doing. So the agency isn't there. In the third case, both Ruth and
Boaz.
yeah,
Boaz.
right. They both know what they're doing. There's a dance.
That's beautiful. You got to write that down. I mean, I know we just recorded it, but you got to write that down because Shavuos is coming. You got to work on that.
Let's do it together. We can work on the Shiur.
Great.
So it's a growth of conscientiousness, right?
Yeah.
In the face of the
opposed to
temptation of
narcissism, right, which is only a person's own consciousness receding into self. Right? There's no collaboration. Yeah.
Can I just jump in? I actually, Dr. Finkelstein stole everything I was going to say, but I just wanted to point out there's one element he's forgetting, that throughout the first of all the relationships of everybody seems to be incestuous, from Yaakov and two sisters. Everything is also throughout the Chumash, in fact, but the more so from the three, ascending order that he had. The one element he's forgetting is this all aspect of selflessness. We have the beginning is the selflessness of the two daughters, the selflessness of Tamar, and then the selflessness of both. Let me repeat, of both Ruth and Boaz, because you look in the Megillus Ruth, Boaz says to her, if the relative takes you, fine. If not, then I'll do it. So you see, he's clearly saying that if he's going to take him, he's fine with that.
You're saying he's very willing.
He's very willing. The ikar here is to be Koreh Shem al Hameis. He's not here for the, he's giving her a bracha, he's giving her bracha not because she didn't run after the youngsters, he's giving her a bracha for her selflessness.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Also, we have Abraham and Sarah, which produce Yitzchak. That's also an uncle and a niece. Very interesting.
At least, and he himself claims it's his half sister, right?
Yeah. That's another point.
I'm just saying, he's saying it. His statement is his half sister.
Yeah. No, I hear you. But let me just point out that this desire nowadays, according to the rabbis, is much lessened by the rabbis diminishing the inclination for relatives. Just to point that out. But nonetheless, we have a lot of other people who want to join in. Aaron Yehuda, do you want to pass to Dr. Padeh? Dr. Patterson, what do you want to do?
Yes, I think Dr. Padeh was next, and I had a quick comment. I also, if people want to check the chat, there's there's some comments there as well when you get to it.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Great shiur, Rabbi.
Great to have you.
Thank you. So for me, the Parsha Kedoshim was always a very special Parsha, because at least the way I understood it was that, and we see this in general in life, there's the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law. And it's very easy sometimes to get stuck and lost in the letter of the law, and we forget the spirit of the law. And to me, what Kedoshim to you really represents is understanding what our true purpose is, what the true meaning is of all the laws that we're given and everything we're supposed to do, and to always keep that in mind, because that's really, I think, what the Ramban says when you can be a Menovel Bereshus Torah, is that when you can be kind of basically an imbecile with the permission of the Torah, is that you can follow everything perfectly to the letter, every I is dotted, every T is crossed, but your intentions and your actions are actually the opposite of what the Torah intends. And so that, to me, that's the most important thing. And
that's a very good point. I think what Dr. Padeh is saying is that when we detach our intellect from what's really behind the purpose of the mitzvos, it's very easy to just be technically okay and be completely off base.
Right, and the legal system is very easy to say, okay, I'm following the law to the letter, I'm doing exactly A, B, C, but everything I'm doing is completely corrupted and completely awful, but I'm actually within the framework of the law, and that's not the way we're supposed to behave. Hashem wants us to be completely above that, and I think that's also how the Goyim behave. The Goyim behave very much to the letter of the law and say, oh yeah, I'm following law, but they really don't care what the intent is.
Yeah, you
and
can
our
see
job
what
is,
Rabbi Nachman just posted.
yes, like Islam. This is true. So I think this is really what the core of Judaism is to really represent Hashem by doing what we're supposed to be doing, not just because we follow the rules and regulations, but because we're following the true intent of Hashem.
Excellent. Tarsha B'Pev. That's great. Thank you, Doctor, for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Aaron Yehuda and maybe Dr. Patterson.
Yeah. Oh yes. I'll keep it brief. Make sure Dr. Patterson gets. My observation on the chat was that there is a genetic theory. It's in the book The Selfish Gene, which is like really by an evolutionary atheist. But he says that we are basically out there trying to propagate our genetic code as a way to survive. So there may be a drive in people to be with somebody from the same gene pool because we want to perpetuate ourselves in that manner. And it's interesting that while this may be true, the Torah does here, like everything else, it tells us when we need to restrain ourselves or refrain from something that may come naturally because it's better in the big picture. It's like fine-tune, just like what we have about astrology, that it's an influence, but we have to rise above it and not be controlled by it. So in the sense that we're going to Parshas Kedoshim and being holy, holy means sometimes refraining from something or separating from something and having discipline regardless of your urges. So I think that this is all very interesting. I don't want to go very deeply. There are other folks who can get into it, but this is another way that Hashem, in the scheme of creation, wants to strengthen us to make the right choices for what's good in the long term, not what maybe impulsively or even genetically by nature we may be inclined towards in the short term.
Yeah, Giddy posted an interesting point in response, so please look at that. Dr. Patterson?
Thank you, Rabbi, again. Huge wow, as always. You touched on several things, and some things you reiterated, extremely important. Toward the end of your remarks, you correctly noted that to be holy is to be other-centered. To be other-centered is to be giving. Hav is at the root of ahava. To be loving is to be giving. Especially if you don't feel like it. Love is not a feeling. Love is a living presence between two. And without that presence, the soul suffocates. Without that relation, it's about the relationship. Jewish teaching is about a relationship. Relationship to God and relationship to our fellow human being. Ben Adam Lamakom, Ben Adam Lechevro. Honoring mother and father is in the category of Ben Adam Lamakom. As we're taught, it takes three to bring a soul into this world. What makes marriage kiddushin? It's because marriage between husband and wife is also marriage to God. It's an firm affirmation of a higher relation. That's what makes it holy matrimony. God performed the first marriage. After God created Eve, he brought her to Adam. And so what is he doing in the meantime? The Midrash says he's braiding her hair, preparing her hair for a wedding. God is her hairdresser, so to say. God makes her beautiful. This is why every bride is beautiful, and we should say so. It has nothing to do with looks, right? It's the relationship. Bride and groom, yeah. So bride and groom are entering into a relationship where with God's help, with God's involvement, they will become a mother and a father. Just one last thing. I mean, our relation to the Creator is like a marriage. A marriage was performed at Mount Sinai, right? And in the Zohar, I just found this passage from Rabbi Hezekiah, who says, honor thy father means honor the Holy One, blessed be he. Honor thy mother means honor the Am Yisrael, the Knesset Yisrael. And therefore, says Rabbi Hezekiah, this commandment includes everything above and below. It's about the higher relation and human relation, how they come together, how they intersect, and therefore how we can draw God into this kingdom, in the between space of this intimacy, this relationship. In Kiddushin that begins, holiness begins with marriage. It begins with marriage. It begins with that relationship that which informs all other relationships, I think. Anyway, those are my thoughts, and thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's really beautiful. Wow. Shakachacha. Henry, great to have you. Great to be with everyone. David, great to see you. Hope you're feeling well. Good Shabbos, everyone.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbos.